Incredible. Here is one of Captain Ibrahim Traoré's most respected soldiers of all time. Yes, Captain Ibrahim Traoré shed tears for this victory. He has no weapon, nothing. Yet he is among the most respected soldiers of Captain Ibrahim Traoré.
They lost him, not once, not twice, but completely. Ibrahim Traoré, the young officer with a reputation for brilliance and silence, simply vanished. It was August 2021. Burkina Faso was boiling. Armed groups were multiplying. French operations intensified in the shadows. But in the heart of the Burkinabe military, something stranger was happening. Traoré had gone off-grid. For 13 days, no one in Ouagadougou heard a word. There was no radio transmission, no phone signal, no border crossing. Even the French satellite network, with its top-level heat and movement detection, found nothing. The Americans thought he'd been kidnapped by jihadists. The French feared something worse: a meeting, a connection, a spark they had spent years trying to smother, and they were right. Traoré hadn't disappeared into the forest. He had entered something far darker, a world few Africans ever returned from. He went looking for the man known only as the Red Devil. Who is the Red Devil? Even in elite circles, the name is used cautiously. Some say he was French Special Forces. Others believe he was trained in Israel, then betrayed by NATO and left to die during a failed mission in Mali. What no one disputes is that he turned, not for money, not for power, but for vengeance. The Red Devil operates alone. No flag, no rank, no fingerprint. For 10 years, he infiltrated foreign embassies, oil companies, private militias, and even African presidencies. Not to destroy them, but to study them, and then to bring them down. So when Ibrahim Traoré left his base, it wasn't to escape. It was to be rebuilt, not in body, in vision. And what the Red Devil would give him in the desert was not a lesson. It was a decision. They didn't speak for hours. Traoré sat in silence, deep underground in a makeshift bunker carved into rock. The air was dry, metallic. He watched the man in crimson tactical gear move like a ghost between consoles and steel cases, efficient, calm, unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, masked, and without emotion. "You left your post. That alone is treason." "Why?" Traoré answered without blinking. "Because I saw the map." That was the right answer. The Red Devil turned and threw a device onto the table. It displayed a rotating image of Africa, overlaid with grid lines, export paths, energy corridors, and classified resource zones. Every major mineral basin was marked, not by flags, but by corporations. Beneath that layer was another: photographs of African presidents, generals, ministers, all tied to payments, wire transfers, security guarantees, even offshore family trust funds. Some names made Traoré stop breathing. These weren't just officials, these were the gatekeepers of independence, all puppets. "This is what liberation looks like," the Red Devil said. "Controlled sovereignty, engineered poverty, stabilized extraction." Then he handed Traoré a file, one marked with Traoré's own name, his recruitment file from before his first deployment, a document prepared not by his government, but by a joint Western African surveillance committee. They had tracked his potential since he was 20. Psychological profile, loyalty index, probable alignment with Western interests. He was being groomed. They thought they had him under control. But something changed. His refusal to accept French advisories, his insistence on Sahel-wide coordination, his rejection of foreign intervention in local operations. He had stepped off the script. "You were never supposed to meet me," the Red Devil said. "That's why you will." The next day, the test began. Not with a mission, but with silence. The Red Devil left him in the bunker for 3 days with no communication, no exit, only files. Traoré read, page after page, contracts, witness testimonies, drone reports, surveillance logs. On the 3rd day, he emerged, not to fight, but to decide. He walked into the chamber where the Red Devil stood by a holographic projection of the Sahel. Traoré placed a single red marker on the center of Burkina Faso. "They think Africa is blind," he said. "Let's show them we can see." That was the moment the Red Devil knew. Traoré wasn't here to learn. He was here to lead. Follow questions. A subtle probe. "Where have you been, Captain? We were worried." Traoré's answer was disarming. "Training. Remote operations in the north, no signals, strict protocol." The general nodded, unconvinced. He had already received reports that Traoré's name appeared in a leaked intelligence memo. one that mentioned a possible convergence between rogue African officers and an unknown external actor. That same night, Traoré made his move. He sent a sealed letter, through an unwatched courier, to a lieutenant colonel in Niger. The message was short. The board is real. The game is rigged. Are you ready? 2 days later, the reply came, waiting for the signal. It was the first confirmed response in a growing shadow network. Officers from Mali, Niger, Guinea, even scattered units inside Senegal. All had lost friends to unexplained ambushes. All had seen convoys rerouted to foreign companies. All had been passed over for promotion because they refused to comply with Western coordination standards. Now they had a common thread. But there was still one threat closest to home. The general, Traoré's superior, was planning something. Surveillance confirmed encrypted calls to a foreign base, budget anomalies, and worst of all, deployment orders that redirected Burkina troops away from key mineral zones, leaving them open to private contractors. Traoré prepared the trap. He leaked a false report claiming he had discovered irregular activity near a French drilling site. He made sure the general received it and watched as it was forwarded within minutes to an unlisted number in Marseille. It was confirmation. Traoré now had proof that someone at the highest level was actively sabotaging national security in exchange for foreign favors. But he didn't expose him yet. He needed to go deeper, cut off his escape routes, and use him to feed disinformation back to the very powers trying to break Africa from within. The mask of loyalty had worked. Now it was time to turn the mask into a mirror and let the traitors see themselves. Traoré had seen enough. He knew now that the enemy wasn't just outside the borders. It was inside the ranks, smiling in briefings, attending diplomatic dinners, and redirecting battalions under orders written in foreign languages. He had to build something new, something invisible, a parallel structure, not an official command, not even a unit, a network of minds. It began with 3 officers, one from Mali, one from Guinea, one from his own regiment, men who had never met, but all of whom had been targeted for reassignment after refusing French military oversight. Each one received a single sentence coded through a weather bulletin frequency. The structure must be rebuilt under the skin. Then the Red Devil activated the second phase. Through an old communications worm embedded in a decommissioned UN laptop, he accessed a private consortium's intranet, the West Africa Development and Oversight Council, a joint structure of banks, energy firms, and stability donors. They weren't governments, but they made decisions like ones. And buried within their digital vaults was a contract titled Post-Coup Economic Safeguard Protocol, AES Contingency Plan. It was chilling. Signed by regional officials and European bankers, the agreement stated that any nation shifting toward a Sahelian coalition outside of ECOWAS would face immediate financial punishment. Frozen accounts, suspended aid, delayed grain imports, and media blackouts. In short, economic suffocation. This wasn't policy. This was war by penstroke. Traoré now understood why every leader who had tried to unite the Sahel had either disappeared, died mysteriously, or been framed for crimes they never committed. The moment you stepped outside the West's designed political architecture, the collapse began. Quiet, legal, invisible. But this time, he wouldn't announce it. He wouldn't call a press conference or make declarations. He would let them keep thinking he was still within the system. And while they watched him salute the flag, he would be unmaking the foundations beneath their feet. His first internal move was subtle. He issued a reshuffle under the pretext of operational rotation. But those reassigned were not random. Each one had either ties to Western NGOs, dual allegiances, or received unexplained foreign scholarships in their military files. And those brought in? Loyal, quiet, curious. They didn't know the full mission. Only that Traoré was asking them to prepare for something larger than borders. Some were skeptical, some afraid. But then the message came. A handwritten letter circulated through 3 cities in one night. It bore no name, only a wax seal, the mark of the Red Devil. It said, "If you want Africa to rise, prepare to operate like those who buried her." They had underestimated him. In their eyes, he was still a young officer playing at revolution. A passionate patriot, maybe even dangerous, but ultimately breakable, containable, bribable. So they reached out. An invitation was sent under diplomatic cover, a closed-door dialogue with regional partners, hosted by a Western embassy in a neutral capital. It wasn't framed as a negotiation. It was a warning wrapped in civility. Traoré accepted. His arrival was quiet, Uneventful, no media, no entourage, just him, a single aide, and silence. Inside the room sat three men: a representative of a European development bank, a retired African statesman, and a soft-spoken diplomat who never introduced himself but who controlled the room with subtle glances. Their message was simple. Burkina Faso was facing destabilizing trends. The military needed to remain cooperative. Resistance to international guidance would result in regrettable consequences. Then came the offer: a guaranteed leadership position, backing from global financial institutions, an economic relief package that would secure his legacy, all in exchange for two things. First, dissolve any moves toward a Sahelian alliance outside ECOWAS. Second, allow oversight of strategic mineral zones by trusted international partners. Traoré sat still. Then he asked a question. What if I refuse? The room fell quiet. The soft-spoken diplomat smiled faintly. You won't refuse, Captain. You'll reconsider. That night, back in his hotel, Traoré made a call, not to Ouagadougou, not to anyone in uniform, but to a contact known only by a code name, Ember 9. It was one of the Red Devil's relay agents, buried deep within diplomatic channels. The message was short. They moved. Time to light the fuse. What the West thought was a containment meeting had been bait. Traoré needed to confirm their next step, and now he had it. Within 72 hours, reports surfaced of massive withdrawals from Burkina Faso's central bank accounts. Aid shipments delayed. News outlets began releasing stories about growing instability and military mismanagement. It was the beginning of the squeeze. But it was exactly what Traoré had planned, because while the West was tightening its grip, he had already activated 4 nodes across Africa, quiet channels of resistance, sparked by coded messages sent from the heart of the Red Devil's network. And with the pressure rising, something unexpected began to emerge, the beginnings of a continent-wide awakening. As the sanctions deepened, the media attacks intensified. Western headlines declared economic collapse. Reports surfaced claiming troop morale was falling. Analysts predicted Traoré wouldn't last 6 months. But inside Burkina Faso, something else was happening. Military officers who had once remained silent began requesting transfers, not to flee, but to join. Messages filtered in from across West Africa, encrypted coordinates, pledges of loyalty, tactical blueprints. A silent army was being formed, not of soldiers, but of minds. Traoré and the Red Devil had prepared for this moment. Together, they had developed a new military doctrine, one that combined guerrilla warfare, cyber disruption, and psychological disinformation. They called it the Doctrine of Shadows. It wasn't about marching in formation or storming capitals. It was about destabilizing the empire from within without firing a single shot. Step 1. Interrupt the information grid. Traoré's tech unit began hijacking frequency ranges used by Western-backed broadcasters. For 3 minutes every night, radio waves across the Sahel carried only one message: Africa does not need permission to be free. Step 2. Economic deception. A shell company, disguised as a failing import firm, was used to reroute essential goods through AES-linked partners. Food, fuel, and medicine flowed in under the radar while official records claimed shortages. Step 3. Exposure. Through the Red Devil's network, a series of anonymous leaks began hitting the global press. Signed only Sahara Line, the documents exposed the exact amounts of mineral wealth extracted from Burkina Faso, without a single cent returning to its people. The West was furious. They responded with threats, sanctions, travel bans. And then they made a mistake. They tried to break the unity forming beneath the surface. A known ECOWAS official issued a directive calling for sanctions not just on Burkina Faso, but on any African officer or state sympathetic to the AES movement. That was the trigger. Suddenly, former skeptics from Niger, Mali, and Guinea began holding secret meetings. Messages poured in from inside Chad and Togo. Traoré wasn't just resisting. He was becoming a beacon. And just when momentum surged, the Red Devil sent one final encrypted file. Traoré decrypted it in silence. It contained a single video, recorded years ago, a secret meeting, a European ambassador, a former African president, and among them, a man Traoré had trusted with his life. The traitor wasn't in Paris. He wasn't in Brussels. He was standing one room away. The man Traoré trusted most had been at the center of everything, a voice in strategy meetings, a companion during diplomatic visits, a symbol of loyalty, and yet the Red Devil's decrypted video showed him seated comfortably between a European ambassador and a former West African president, negotiating military access, resource contracts, and one chilling phrase, "We can still reverse the AES infection." It wasn't rage that filled Traoré. It was precision. He didn't act immediately. He waited, let the betrayer believe he was still part of the plan. For a week, Traoré continued to seek his advice. He gave him tasks. He invited him to meetings, and then he invited him to a loyalty summit, an internal gathering of high-ranking AES-aligned officers. The purpose? To declare a unified protocol and unveil the next doctrine phase. The traitor arrived early, confident, smiling, but what awaited him was no summit. It was a tribunal. The room was sealed, phones confiscated, a single document was placed on the table, the transcript of his meeting with the foreign ambassador. Signed, time-stamped, verified. He didn't deny it. He simply said, "You'll never survive without help from them." Traoré responded with a single sentence. That's what they said about Sankara. The man was quietly detained. No press, no public fallout. The silence was the punishment. His name erased from command, from records, from the future. That act sent a shockwave through every silent collaborator. From Dakar to Lomé, those who had once flirted with both sides went cold. For the first time, it became clear Traoré wasn't just resisting Western power, he was burning the bridges that connected to it. Then, the signal came. A coordinated release of AES flags in 5 capitals at once. Ouagadougou, Bamako, Niamey, Conakry, and N'Djamena. Soldiers hoisted them in silent unison. No speeches, no announcements, just presence. It wasn't a rebellion, it was an alignment. And for the first time since colonialism fell, a military alliance formed on African soil without external permission. The Red Devil sent only one word: activated. They couldn't stop him through diplomacy. Sanctions had failed. Their traitor inside the circle had been neutralized. So, the West made a final move. A small convoy in eastern Burkina Faso, escorting humanitarian aid, was ambushed. Dozens dead. Witnesses vanished. Within hours, foreign media blamed AES-linked fighters. Footage surfaced. Masked men shouting slogans, holding AES flags, threatening civilians. But something was off. Traoré watched the clip on loop, frame by frame. One fighter made a hand gesture, something only used by a private mercenary group operating out of Libya. Another wore boots standard to a French military contractor. He didn't react publicly. Instead, he activated Protocol Mirage. AES-aligned cyber units cross-referenced the footage with metadata and intercepted satellite imaging. What they found confirmed everything. The so-called attackers had been flown in 2 days earlier on an unmarked aircraft, one that previously landed at a NATO supply hub. It was a false flag, a carefully staged attempt to fracture the AES alliance, discredit the movement, and trigger international military intervention. The goal wasn't just to destroy Traoré, it was to collapse the doctrine he had built. But Traoré didn't flinch. Instead, he responded by revealing what no one had expected. He held a quiet, encrypted live stream with 3 AES heads of state. No press, no scripts, just data. The Red Devil had uncovered it weeks earlier. Buried 300 meters beneath the desert plains of northern Burkina Faso lay an untapped geological vault containing over $500 billion worth of rare earth elements: coltan, cobalt, titanium, and cesium. Enough to shift global tech supply chains forever. For decades, it had been kept secret, mapped quietly by Western geologists, protected by private militias, left untouched to avoid attention. It was supposed to remain off the books, but now it was public. Traoré didn't just reveal the location, he declared it the property of the African people, a no-go zone for foreign corporations, guarded by AES forces. The minerals wouldn't be auctioned, they would be used as leverage to build African autonomy from the inside out: energy, transport, digital infrastructure, and defense. The announcement shattered the silence. For the first time, major African cities erupted not in protest, but in celebration. Youth leaders, miners, students, and even rival political groups hailed the moment as a turning point. The West's false flag had ignited the opposite of fear. It had awakened belief. They had one move left. The West, now exposed and humiliated, could no longer afford subtlety. Their media narrative had collapsed. Their economic sanctions backfired. The resource vault had gone public. AES flags were rising across the continent like wildfire. So they returned to what they had always relied on: force. It came without warning. A drone, silent, black, and unmarked, crossed into Burkina Faso airspace at night. No transponder, no heat trail. Its path, a direct flight to Traoré's convoy. Its payload, targeted assassination. What they didn't know was that the Red Devil was watching. He had been monitoring foreign satellite adjustments for 2 days. He'd seen the coded relays. He'd already traced the drone's launch, operated by a private European contractor through a third-party logistics firm in North Africa. The convoy wasn't real, it was bait. Traoré had doubled his appearance schedule the week before, feeding false travel routes into public channels. The real him was already underground in a secure AES coordination cell, designing the next doctrine phase. When the drone struck, it hit an empty armored jeep. News broke in the West. Traoré killed in explosion. The headlines ran for 5 hours. Then came the live broadcast. A defiant Ibrahim Traoré stood flanked by his AES counterparts, not from Burkina Faso, but from an undisclosed location in Mali. Behind them, the AES flag waved. The message was clear: if you strike one of us, you awaken all of us. And then he revealed what the West had feared most: captured telemetry logs, satellite feeds, drone codes, all traced, all verified. Traoré didn't just survive the assassination attempt, he exposed it to the world. For the first time, African command centers across multiple nations issued a coordinated denunciation, not just against the strike, but against the system that allowed it to happen. International courts called for independent inquiries. Western media went quiet. Analysts stumbled to explain. The private contractor scrubbed its online presence. But the Red Devil went further. He released a trove of classified documents to a dozen Pan-African journalists. Files showing covert military operations disguised as humanitarian missions, maps of undeclared resource zones, communications showing African leaders offered bribes to abandon AES. The silence that followed was global. The strike that was meant to kill Traoré had done something else entirely. It had declared to the world that the age of invisibility was over, and that the war for African sovereignty had already been won in the shadows. The failed assassination was not the end. It was the beginning of something the world had not seen before. For the first time in decades, African nations spoke, not as scattered voices echoing in colonial chambers, but as one rhythm, one defiance, one purpose. Traoré addressed the world from an undisclosed AES stronghold. The room was plain, no luxury, no gold curtains, just a flag, a microphone, and a leader who had survived every trap, every lie, every bullet. His speech lasted 12 minutes. But those 12 minutes rewrote history. We were not meant to rise, not as leaders, not as nations. We were designed to be managed, manipulated, extracted, and forgotten. That era ends today. He spoke of the lies taught in schools, of the debt traps that chained countries without firing a single shot, of leaders who sold futures for foreign passports and hidden estates. They tried to make us believe we were too divided to unite, too poor to build, too weak to resist. But they forgot something. Africa remembers. The Red Devil was never seen again. Some say he returned to the shadows. Others believe he died the night the drone struck. Traoré never confirmed. But a final message surfaced, emailed to 3 African universities. It read, "This mission was never about one man. It was about giving the next generation what we were denied: truth, agency, and the right to fail without being punished for rising." And with that, the final protocol was triggered. AES nations began implementing a new regional security compact, African-designed, African-led, African-funded. Resource contracts were renegotiated under public oversight. Independent Pan-African media houses received direct state support. A digital African bank was launched with gold and lithium reserves from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea. The reaction from the West was muted. They couldn't stop what had already taken root. They had underestimated the silence, because the real war had never been fought with weapons. It was fought in forgotten archives, buried data, erased truths, and stolen futures. Traoré knew that. And now, so did the people. Across the continent, Murals of him began appearing, painted on walls in Kinshasa, in Cotonou, in Kigali. Not of him as a soldier, but as a symbol, a man who chose the storm over safety, a soldier who met the Red Devil and returned with a continent's redemption. "We do not ask for the world's permission," he said in his final line. "We are Africa, and we have remembered who we are."